Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Byju's, and welcome to a discussion on governance. In this video, we will be discussing all about transparency. We'll start off by discussing the definition of transparency. We'll then move on and understand the need for transparency. And in the same video, we will also be discussing under transparency the most important law in our country, that is the RTI Act, or the Right to Information Act of the year 2005. Under the law, we'll discuss the office of CIC, the Central Information Commission, as well as the SIC, the State Information Commissions in the respective states. As far as the RTI Act is concerned, in 2019, a change was made with respect to the terms and conditions of service of the office holders of the Central Information Commissioner, the Information Commissioners of the CIC, as well as the SIC. We'll see what changes were there. Plus, we'll also look at the question that was asked in UPSC in the year 2020 from the same topic. Then we'll discuss some issues, some challenges pertaining to the RTI Act, and we'll close our discussion with some suggestions on the same. Finally, a couple of points on the judiciary under RTI. As far as judiciary is concerned, way back in 2009, a case was started in the Delhi High Court wherein the question was whether judiciary is under RTI or not. Finally, in 2019, in the Subhash Chandra Agarwal case, Supreme Court did accept that the office of Chief Justice of India does come under RTI. We'll see about the judgment. We'll see some challenges and issues with respect to the same judgment. Then, a very important question: are political parties under RTI or not? And should they be under RTI or not is also a question. And finally, to address some concerns, we'll also look at the PM CARES. As far as the current situation is concerned, PM CARES is not under RTI. We'll see what are the issues with respect to PM CARES not being under RTI. And let's now begin our discussion on this particular module. So, first up, as far as transparency is concerned, how would you define transparency? Transparency is a phenomena of opening up of the functioning of the government to people. The idea is that you can ask questions from the government and the government will respond by providing facts. Facts with respect to how decisions are made, facts and figures with respect to how certain objectives have been achieved or not achieved. So, without facts, we will not be able to have an informed opinion. And without facts, we are just another person with a random opinion. Facts are extremely important when it comes to analyzing the performance of the government, whether the government has been proactive, whether the government has been fulfilling its promises or not. All boils down to the application and the knowledge of facts. So, transparency is opening up of the government to the people by providing people with information. And that is why freedom to ask this question, freedom to get information is the core essence of transparency. Now, let's just get back to the previous slide where we had seen the definition of sorts. Secrecy is a linchpin of abuse of power. What is linchpin? Linchpin means something which is very vital. Secrecy is very, very vital to abuse of power. What goes on behind the closed doors of government? If it is not told to people, if you're not informed about that, then there is a possibility of abuse of power. And transparency is the real antidote, a medicine to affect the or counter effect the poison, the medicine which will solve the problem of abuse of power. So, wherever there is secrecy, there is bad governance. There is going to be red tapeism. There is going to be an issue of corruption, of non-transparency, of arbitrary behavior. Wherever you have transparency, you have accountability, you have responsibility, you have effectiveness, you have an inclusive government, you will have good governance. So, with this in mind, let's also look into why do we need transparency? So much so for the definition, but what exactly is the reason that we need transparency for? Now, coming to the need for transparency. Why do we need transparency? What are those reasons which make it extremely important to have transparency? First things first, transparency ensures accountability of the government. The government becomes more accountable to people. As far as the governments are concerned, as far as political parties are concerned, they are habituated to making promises. Now, as informed citizens, whether they have been able to fulfill those promises, whether they have been able to deliver upon those promises, can only be ascertained if we have the facts, relevant facts, information, data with respect to those aspects. For example, I'm sure you're aware of the Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, the scheme wherein gas connections were to be provided to all households. Now, in 2017, amidst all the fanfare, amidst the discussion in the media that the government is going all guns blazing, ensuring that PMUY is a success everywhere, and we had ministers from various ministries and politicians claiming that we have provided gas connection to the nook and corner of this country. Somebody filed an RTI seeking information on how many northeastern states had received this gas connection. And to our surprise, the response came that barring the states of Assam and Manipur, not a single gas connection had been provided to any of the northeastern states. That was almost a year after the launch of the scheme. Now, what does this prove? This proves that now, the next time a minister, a concerned MP of the party, tries to boast in front of you, in front of the people, that see, this is what we have done, you can always ask them and show the facts in front of them that no, you are yet to fulfill those promises. So, number one, ensures accountability of the government. Number two, it reduces corruption. It reduces abuse of power. How? See, the government, the state, has complete monopoly over various aspects of providing services. When you become an IAS officer, you also will have a complete monopoly on how to provide those services. What kind of policies, how to implement those policies, how to make those rules, etc. Apart from it, if nobody asks you any question, you have a discretion of sorts, a discretion on how to implement those policies. If you have monopoly, complete control in what areas to perform, how to perform, you have discretion on when and how to take decisions, you reduce transparency from it. Meaning, now you are not open to being answerable to people insofar as the performance of these functions are concerned. This is the classic formula for corruption. This is how you define corruption. Monopoly plus discretion minus transparency. The more transparent the functioning, the less the corruption. So, corruption can be reduced. Abuse of power can be checked through transparency. Now, all these scams, be it the Adarsh Society scam, be it the 2G scam, the CWG scam, the Commonwealth Games scam, or the Rafale scam, all these have been exposed by and large because some person filed an RTI, sought a response, exposed the wrongdoing in the government. Then it also increases the efficiency of the government. Constant questioning of the government with facts. If your opinion is substantiated with facts, you can constantly question the government. And when you present information, now it is going to become exceedingly difficult for the government to keep on lying on your face because you are armed, you are empowered with information. For example, Aam Aadmi Party in Delhi before the 2015 elections had promised to set up universities, 20 universities once they come to power. They had also promised that they would add 5,000 buses to the existing fleet of buses in Delhi. Now, before the 2020 elections, somebody filed an RTI seeking response on how many universities had actually been opened in the last 5 years so that we can compare the promise and the performance. It was found that not a single university had been opened. And when it comes to the number of buses being increased, forget increase. In fact, the number of buses plying on the roads decreased by roughly 4,200 owing to bad condition. So now you can question the government. Governments activities are open to public scrutiny. You can always keep on questioning the government, their performance, ensuring that they are on their toes. That is a need for transparency. Then, as far as government is concerned and people are concerned, there is state on one hand and people on the other. There is a huge asymmetry of power. It's a classic David versus Goliath story. State is almighty, all powerful. We are mere mortals. We can't take on the might of the government. But if there is flow of information from the state, from the government to the people, you will find that this power asymmetry gets corrected slowly. The balance is restored. Information is power, and if the flow of information continues, this asymmetry of power between the state and the people, it gets restored. Now, the people can be treated as equals when it is compared to the state, the power of the state. So, it also corrects the asymmetry of power between people and the government. Apart from this, it obviously promotes people's participation in governance. Now people feel as an equal participant in the functioning of the government. For example, a few years back, RBI had been very hesitant in declaring the total number of NPAs in the country. But after the CIC order and the judgment of Supreme Court in the Jayantilal Mistry case, finally the RBI agreed that yes, people have a right to know what is the condition, what is happening with the public sector banks. And the banks should disclose the information with respect to the non-performing assets. How has this happened? Because we are empowered to ask questions. Because now the banks are becoming more transparent. It is through these RTIs that we came to know that 23,000 frauds had been committed from 2013 to 2018 across various branches of various banks in the country. All thanks to the right that we have to access information. Then it can also help in correcting trust deficit. How? See, what goes on behind the closed doors of the government in those huge bungalows, in those big buildings of the North Block and the South Block in Delhi, we are not aware of that. And the mystery, that is the functioning of the government, is shrouded in mystery, has to be demystified. That mystery has to be brought down. If you start checking the mystery, if the functioning of the government is open to public, it also helps in checking the trust deficit. Largely, in popular public perception, it is felt that the government employees are corrupt, even though most of them may not be corrupt. A few definitely are. And this can be pointed out to one very important reason: the lack of trust. Because we do not know how they function, because we do not know what goes on behind a decision, what all factors did they consider when they took a decision. This points to only one thing. If we are able to reduce this trust deficit, if we are able to improve the trust that a common man bestows upon the government, we can ensure that people are genuinely satisfied. So, if people are provided with proper information, data, to ensure that what is happening behind those closed doors is open to public view, you can also participate and see what is happening there. People also will feel more inclusive and slowly will have a reduced deficit of trust. So, it also helps in correcting trust deficit. And finally, understand this point. When it comes to the government providing information, how will the government provide information? The government will provide information if they maintain the information themselves properly. If they themselves do not maintain information, how will they provide it to us? So, if you have a regime in place, a law in place, which will force the government to provide information, then, and information in timely manner, a time-bound manner, then the government will also feel that they need to improve the data management. They need to sort out the files. They need to ensure that they keep their documents in order so that if at any given point of time somebody asks for a document, the government is more than willing and is in the condition to present the document at the earliest. For that, you need to also improve your offices. Meaning, whenever we enter a public building, we are greeted with the sight of the files, huge piles of files, and the stench of the files spread all across. A person with asthma may die if he or she is allowed or asked to spend, say, half an hour in those godowns. But as and when the government employees are forced to provide information in a timely manner, they will also ensure that the offices are kept in order. Now, if the offices are kept in order, what is going to happen? Say, for example, you are in a police station wherein a new crime has been registered. And if all the previous FIRs are also in order, maybe online, in a digitized format, you may also come across a similar kind of case which was committed, say, 5 years back. You can draw parallels. And this is something which seldom happens. There is a lot of information which is already pending in various government files. Because those files are normally not accessible or is very difficult to access physically, the government does not take care or does not refer to those previous files. If you are also asked to maintain your accounts properly, if you are asked to ensure that everything has to be in order, that will help you as well, the government employee as well, in referring to some file, say 2 years back, 5 years back, and taking a much more informed decision. So it will not only help the people, it will also help the government in improving the quality, in improving the pace of decision making, because now those files can very easily be accessed by the employees themselves. So these are various aspects of which, if these are fulfilled, we will ensure that there is a proper sound regime of transparency, and this is why we actually need transparency. So as far as ensuring transparency is concerned, what has the government done so far? Firstly, there is something called proactive disclosure. Meaning what? The government discloses information on its own. If the government wants to disclose something on its own, let's say the minister has attended some meeting and he has given some remarks on the meeting. The minister went out to some foreign country. The PM went to a foreign country. What was the discussion happening there? What was the MOA signed there? What has been happening with respect to some scheme, say launching a scheme? What has been the result of the scheme? All such things can be given to people without people seeking that information. This is what is called proactive disclosure. Meaning what? Government providing information without people asking for it. Meaning on its own. This is what is called proactive disclosure. Disclosure on its own without people seeking the information. And the classic example is the PIB, the Press Information Bureau. Now, this website is regularly on a daily basis updated by the government, and all relevant information as far as the functioning of the government is concerned is provided to people. Apart from it, there is another aspect, something which is called reactive disclosure. Herein, we have to seek information. The government will not disclose the information on its own, but will disclose it when demanded. Disclosure on demand. This is what is reactive disclosure, when the government will disclose the information on demand. And the best example is the Right to Information Act of the year 2005. Now, coming on to the Constitution. As far as the Constitution is concerned, are there provisions? Is there any aspect of the Indian Constitution which supports the idea? Yes, obviously there are. First up, if you look at the preamble, the philosophy, things like liberty, things like freedom, freedom of thought, expression, the idea of justice, democracy, these are the ideas which require some kind of right to information. So the philosophy of preamble also supports the idea, amply supports it. Secondly, as far as Article 19 is concerned, Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause A gives every citizen the freedom of speech and expression. Now, without information, we will not be able to exercise the freedom of speech and expression. So it's pretty obvious that Article 19, Clause 1A, the freedom of speech and expression, also supports the idea of right to information. However, Supreme Court, in the judgment of the Raj Narayan case, The same case wherein Indira Gandhi was disqualified by the Allahabad High Court in the elections of 1971. So, in the Raj Narayan case, which was later challenged in Supreme Court, the Supreme Court held this fact that right to know, right to information is an integral part of Article 19. Also, 2 years later, in the Ramesh Thapar case of 1977, it was reiterated by the Supreme Court that right to know is a part of Article 19. Then, in the year 1989, in a case of Indian Express versus Reliance Petrochemicals, again the Supreme Court this time said that not just Article 19, right to know is an integral part of Article 21. Right to information is also embedded in Article 21. So, we have various places wherein in the Constitution there is right to information. And as of the current situation, data is the new wealth. Data is a new oil. And as far as Article 39B and 39C are concerned, Article 39B and C of the DPSPs talk about how the policies of the state should ensure that there is a reduction in the concentration of wealth, and the policy of the state should ensure that the resources of the country should be used in such a fashion to subserve everybody's good. The natural resources are meant for everyone, and the policies should reduce the concentration of wealth. So these two articles under DPSP also talk about wealth, and data being the new wealth also points in this direction that the right to information is an integral part of even the DPSPs. So there is ample evidence to support the idea that the Constitution also provides for, in an indirect fashion, implicitly, right to information. Now, as far as a categorical law is concerned, for the first time in 1997, a committee was formed. This committee was headed by H.D. Shourie, a retired bureaucrat and an activist, a social activist. And this committee was given the task to frame a law which could provide people with information so that people could question the government and seek information. So finally, after this committee gave recommendations, in the year 2002, we got our first ever Freedom of Information Act, FOI Act of the year 2002. But when it comes to freedom of information, you have to also understand that this law per se was such a weak piece of legislation that the government did not even notify it. You know how the things function? You have a bill in the parliament. The bill, when it gets passed by the parliament and is sent to the president, after the assent of the president, the bill becomes an act. But the act is still not applicable to people until and unless it is notified in the official gazette of the country. So the act then becomes a law after the notification in the gazette. So bill on passage becomes an act. Act on notification becomes a law. The government did not even feel the need to notify this law. Why? Why was FOI a weak piece of law? Because there was practically no penal provision. What if the government servant refuses to give you information you asked for? Should there be not some penalty in place? Some kind of provision to punish the person? There was no penalty provision in the law. Plus, there were a lot of areas which were exempted, meaning lot of areas on which you could not seek information. So eventually, if there is too much of exemption, there is no penalty, no punishment, why would the government servant willingly provide information? Had that been the case on its own, we would not have needed FOI. We would need such a law only because the government authorities were not providing information to us on their own. So the law being very weak, and interestingly, while the law was being passed, there were already murmurs amongst the parliamentarians that we need a different law. And so when the law was passed, it was never notified, and discussion started on how to frame another law. And that is when we saw the framing of the new law called the RTI Act, which was passed in the year 2005. Along with it, this particular act was repealed in the same year. So that's the story for the Freedom of Information Act 2002. Now, when I put forward this allegation that the particular Freedom of Information Act was a very weak piece of law, this means there must be some kind of criteria to ensure that the particular regime is a very sound regime, meaning there is a regime in place, there is a law in place which is very, very sound, an excellent law. In short, how should a good law look like? What are those features which would make a law on information, on the right to information, good, and the shortage of these features, the missing out factor of these features would make the law weak? First thing, and the most important factor which should be there to ensure that a law is very sound, reasonable, it's a good piece of law, is the fact that the fees should be reasonable. When I say the fees has to be reasonable, this means that the fees which is required for the person to submit to get information should be low. If suppose the government says, don't worry, we have an RTI Act in place, you can seek any kind of information. But mind you, when you want some information, you have to pay 10 lakh rupees to the government. Is that a good piece of law? I mean, how is it a logical piece of law? To get an information, why should you be paying 10 lakh rupees? So the fees has to be reasonable. And in the new law, the RTI Act 2005, the fees is reasonable. Even though the law does not define what is reasonable fees, that's a challenge. But by and large, we know that the fees is just rupees 10. To top it, no fees, zero fees for people of the BPL community, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes. So that's a very, very good thing. The fees is very low or even zero in certain cases. Number two, now, should there be some kind of penal provision, some penalty, some kind of penalty in place in case the concerned official denies giving us information? So if you seek some information on, let's say, the transfer of a government employee or how much money was spent on a particular scheme, should there not be some kind of punishment to the person if he refuses to give us information? That is the penalty, the penal provisions. So penalty in case of denial of information. Number two. Number three is this fact that if there is a penalty, who should be the one to impose the penalty? How would we come to know that this penalty should be imposed? In what cases? Because there are always going to be some exemptions. The official may make some very sound excuse that, sir, if we give this information to you, the entire security of the country will be threatened. We can't give this information. Now, if the concerned official refuses to give us information on any ground, can we complain to some independent authority? Is it possible? So, there should be some kind of independent complaint mechanism wherein if the concerned government employee, the concerned government official refuses to give us information, we can go and complain to the authority, and that authority acting on our complaint can seek information from the concerned official or enforce some kind of penalty on the person for refusing the information uselessly. And finally, the most important point, when it comes to any law on right to information being appropriate, the real crux of the law should be maximum disclosures and minimum exemption, meaning disclose as much information as possible under the law. People constantly will ask the government questions. Please disclose as much as possible. The exemptions should be minimized. Only those things should not be disclosed, the disclosure of which would harm the security, the integrity, the relationship with foreign states of the nation. Otherwise, if something does not harm the security, the integrity, the sovereignty of the country, there is absolutely no need to hide it. So, maximum disclosures, minimum exemptions. If a law has all these aspects, then we'll call that particular regime as a very sound one, a good one for right to information. Sadly, the Freedom of Information Act lacked all these, and the RTI Act, which replaced the law, had all these important aspects. So, finally, in the year 2005, we gave to ourselves the master key to good governance, as the second ARC calls it, the Right to Information Act of the year 2005. Now, there are various countries which have a law of a similar kind in place. For example, a country like Sweden. Sweden was the first country to have a similar law right from the year 1766. Then countries like USA have had this law since 1966. Countries like Australia since 1982, Denmark since 1987, Norway in the 1970s. Even our neighbor Bangladesh has had this law since 1982. And then other countries like Hong Kong, Bhutan, they also had these laws since 1995. Finally, we also got our RTI in the year 2005. So now let's discuss the key features and all those important aspects that are contained in the RTI Act 2005. First up, and the most important fact, is that citizens have a right to information. Just like there are some fundamental rights which are provided only to citizens. Articles 15, Article 16, Article 19, Article 29, Article 30. These 5 fundamental rights are given only to citizens. Similarly, the Right to Information Act is meant for citizens only. So, all citizens have right to information. Then, how do you define information? Information in this particular act has been defined in a very, very broad manner. In fact, so much so that everything under the sun is seen as some kind of information. Records that the government has. Memos. Memos are basically the documents which are used within the office to communicate from one official to the other. That's called a memo. Opinions, order logbooks, reports, models, documents, emails, advice, circulars, contracts, paper samples, press release, all these things are information. You can seek information on all these aspects. So, what exactly can we access? If I ask you a question, can you go and access the midday meal scheme food? Let's say you go to the concerned public employee and you say, "Sir, I want you to give me some sample of the midday meal food that you serve to kids in the school." The person says, "Okay, sir, we give the kids some, say, 200 grams of rice, 100 grams of dal." You say, "No, sir, no. I don't want this data. I want you to give me sample of what is the exact meal served." Is this allowed? Yes, it is. You are also allowed to take certified samples of materials. You can force the government employee to give you exact sample of the meal being served. Now, obviously, you can't ask for, "Please give me 100 kgs of rice as sample." They'll give you a small amount of sample, which will be enough for you to understand what kind of food they serve. Now, if you are asked, or if you go to an employee, say in the PWD department, Public Works department, and you ask the person, "Sir, I have seen that you guys are constructing a road somewhere, and I need a sample of all the material that is being used. Can you please give me the sample?" Again, the official might say, "Sir, see, we are using cement of this company, sand from here, etc." You say, "No, sir, I want the exact sample." Can you seek the exact sample? Again, yes, you can. You can seek the very exact sample. The public official will give you a small amount of sample of the exact material which is being used. Now, if suppose the road has already been constructed, then what do? I mean, they can't break down the road, demolish the bridge, and then give you a sample. So they'll give you the contents, and or they can also direct you to a place where such a construction is going on and a similar kind of material is being used. So in those cases, you will be given some kind of document which contains what were the various varieties of products used. But while the construction is going on, you are free to file a request for information, and the information would also contain certified samples of the material being used. Now, obviously, there would be certain limitations to it. For example, every organization, every company, every corporate, when it comes to India, suppose KFC comes to India to set up its food chain, or Coca-Cola, it comes to India. So when these corporates come to India, they also provide information with respect to the contents that are there in the particular product, so as to ensure that no large scale damage happens to the health of people in general. Now, the government has information on all the content that is there, whether in KFC or Coca-Cola or all such international companies. Can you go to the government and say, sir, I'm a citizen, you're the government, I seek information from you. Please give me information on all the ingredients that are found in KFC. Maybe you're planning to open your own shop. Can you seek this information? Obviously, you can't. This is a trade secret. Information like this, which is a third party information, which is a commercial secret, that will be protected. Now, if suppose you want some other information on KFC, where they're procuring their chicken from and stuff like that, you can go and file a request. The government will ask KFC, can we give this information to people? Now, if KFC says yes, then you'll get the information. If KFC says no, you won't get the information. Why? Because intellectual property, trade secrets are exempted. We'll see in the video itself, in the coming duration of time, certain areas which are exempted. That is section 8. We'll be seeing it very shortly. So there are certain things like intellectual property, certain things like trade secrets. Now, as far as this is concerned, obviously, not everything can be asked. Some things are exempted. But by and large, you saw the definition of information, and you also saw what we can access. Large gamut of things. We can take notes, extracts, certified copies of documents. We can also access records.